Okay, continuing with part two of our conversation with Howard Husock of the American Enterprise Institute. We were just talking about a new paper that he has prepared for and released from AEI entitled Anonymous Giving Through Donor Advised Funds. So let's just pick up where we were. First, more generally on DAFs, one of the benefits of them, as you were noting, is I'll use a hypothetical here. I'm a car dealer who's doing well in the middle of my life. Let's put me in, I don't know, suburban Milwaukee or something. I can get a deduction to put it into an account that will then, make money, and I can give that away later. One of the criticisms, I guess, of DAF, so why do I get the deduction now? Shouldn't I not get the deduction until I give it to what the policymakers, including politicians now, are calling working charities? Why don't I make money in my own regular non-charitable or regular old bank account that the income in which, or the money in which, is generated by my car dealership? Why do I get the deduction right away?
Well, to me, the idea that we're creating what I call a rainy day fund for charitable giving is a value. And, candidly, as a conservative, the idea that this directs more funds to the private philanthropic sector than to the government, I would rather have those donors have the discretion over those funds than have it be a very tiny additional source of revenue for the government. So I've argued with the opponents of DAFs just on this basis. Say, well, you trust the government more to spend the money than the donors. And they bristle at that, but I think it's demonstrably true. If you're trying to limit the tax deduction, that's its effect.
And your paper is regarding the anonymity that one gets or can get through a DAF. So what did your paper find regarding the use of DAFs for that purpose or function?
Well, the backstory, of course, is that progressive senators, Sheldon Whitehouse comes to mind, have attacked what they call dark money. And dark money is anonymous money said to flow through to politically influential groups. And there are allegedly anonymous donors who avail themselves of this anonymity and are distorting our democratic system. He mentioned specifically groups that might be supporting amicus briefs to the Supreme Court, and their sources are not disclosed. So that inspired me. Is dark money really a thing? And when you look at the largest donor advised funds, and the five that I looked at control more than 50% of all of the wealth that's in donor advised funds of all kinds, of which there are more than 700 in the United States, and these five have that largest share, you find that only about 5% of all of their grants are anonymous. So it's a very small number, first of all. And second of all, there's a significant overlap between the non-anonymous and the anonymous grant making. So Doctors Without Borders, the Salvation Army, St. Jude's Children's Hospital, these lead the way, both anonymous and non-anonymous. Now, it's also interesting to learn that because there is this critique from progressives that the dark money goes to conservative groups, it turns out that the largest recipients of anonymous gifts include the Civil Liberties Union, Planned Parenthood, and the Southern Poverty Law Center. So these are actually left liberal groups who are the recipients of the largest pots of dark money, the Natural Resources Defense Council. So if dark money is a bad thing, left liberal groups are actually among the leaders in receiving it.
And that's certainly also the case, although I guess it's hard to quantify because it's dark. But many are noticing that the C4 usage of dark money, which is, I think, where it started, is disproportionately liberal more recently than it has been since Citizens United.
Well, as you know, if you're running a donor advised fund, you cannot direct funds to a C4.
Yeah.
You can only direct them to an IRS approved C3. But we are seeing this interesting push from the left trying to force Fidelity specifically not to permit what they call what these protesters call hate groups to receive grants from Fidelity donor advisors. And so they would say the Family Research Council is a hate group and therefore it should be banned by Fidelity. Well, people on the right may just counter say, well, wait a minute, the Southern Poverty Law Center, they're unjust in labeling people hate groups. Why should they receive the money? We object to them just as much. So to its credit, to date, Fidelity, despite being under attack, has said, we will allow our donor advisors to direct their funds to any IRS approved nonprofit C3. And I think that's a very defensible, and in fact, the only defensible position.
Let's do this since we're in the weeds on legality. Let me get one more in there. If I'm a private foundation where I am supposed to, as part of what I'll call the deal with the government, report to whom I make grants, if I, as the Hartmann Foundation, give to a donor advised fund, I could do that to anonymize my grant making, couldn't I? And shouldn't that get a furrowed eyebrow from somebody, a regulator, a politician? If I'm using DAFs to anonymize what would otherwise be my publicly reported grant, that's a curious use of DAFs, wouldn't it be?
Well, it wouldn't otherwise be publicly reported unless it reaches a certain magnitude. So if you and I are running the Husock Hartmann think tank, maybe we should do that.
we could have a good logo right out. Yeah.
But if we were doing that, we would have to report on donors, but only donors that were met a certain threshold. We don't have to report all of our donors. And so the donor advisors at donor advised funds who choose anonymity are not necessarily choosing between being disclosed and not being disclosed. They wouldn't be disclosed anyway if they're relatively small gifts. First of all, but second of all, nothing has ever prevented any American from donating to his or her alma mater, to the Salvation Army, or to any group and saying, I insist that this be an anonymous grant.
Yeah.
You have always had that right, and the donor advised fund is no different in that way.
So let me ask you this then. You told the Chronicle of Philanthropy in an article which termed your study controversial. At core, this might be really the argument, the discussion. You said, I'm, quote, not suspicious of the motives of charitable givers. Why not? I mean, shouldn't I be suspicious? Would it be unreasonable for one to be suspicious of Mark Zuckerberg's support of the Center for Tech and Civic Life through the Silicon Valley Community Foundation? I'm asking you about your lack of suspicion. Shouldn't we have some regarding some?
I don't remember saying that, and I'm sure I did. But I think suspicion can be well placed, but shouldn't lead us to assume bad motives. I would amend it in that way. And so to ascribe bad motives to all anonymous donors contravenes, the principles that many may have. People today, they may not want to be solicited. They may believe with Maimonides that anonymity is one of the highest levels of charity, or they may fear being canceled. People who gave to certain referenda campaigns in California found their careers adversely affected. So people today may have all sorts of grounds for choosing anonymity that are worthy of respect.
Mm-hmm. The current proposals to, I'll say, reform DAFs, the current proposal, I guess I should say, I'm thinking of the ACE Act, the Arnold Madoff proposal, doesn't really speak to anonymity, does it? It more speaks to the warehousing critique of DAFs. And would a concentration on anonymity, well, I guess I'll leave it at that. This concern on the part of conservative philanthropy about anonymity, is that the best response to the ACE Act, which doesn't really, I think, try to address anonymity? It speaks to the warehousing problem as they see it.
Oh, I've written about the problems with the Arnold Madoff accelerating charitable effectiveness uh, proposal, that it's a distinct issue than the dark money canard. So I would view those as in two separate buckets. But no, anything that forces disbursements uh, overall, as Arnold Madoff wants to do, undermines the chance for donors to see their gifts appreciate in value, to disperse them over time in a thoughtful way, and is a solution in search of a problem.
Are they forcing disbursements, or are they just making a bargain with you in return for the tax beneficial status? No one's forcing anyone to.
Sure they are. They say you have to disperse within 15 years. So
For the tax beneficial status, though.
Well, that's right. But well, I suppose that's the trade-off. But, since we live in a very high tax environment in the United States, relatively high tax environment, foregoing the tax incentive is a serious forcing one to, or influencing one to forego the tax incentive is a serious stick. And so the effect of it is to pressure one, we'll say, not force, but pressure one to disperse, maybe not in your own good time.
And if one's in conservative philanthropy, or if you advise conservative philanthropy, if you're a conservative philanthropoid, is this donor freedom issue as big as maybe some others, like the progressivization or the politicization of philanthropy? Those two are concerns. I guess I'm asking you to rank what the concerns would be or something like that. Is it possible to address both fairly? The concerns about whatever the ratio is, the over-resourced other side ideologically, is it possible to try to address that while remaining respectful of, in some way, anonymity and donor freedom?
Well, I want to do anything. I feel it's important to encourage more and more Americans to donate to charity, both because charities do good work, but because, as I said earlier, that's the oxygen of civil society. And so the fact that the Tax Reform and Jobs Act of 2017 raised the standard deduction such that almost 90% of Americans don't itemize anymore and can't avail themselves of the charitable deduction, that concerns me. I want to encourage that. In terms of the titans battling each other among the progressive versus conservative forces, yeah, I'm very concerned about frankly, the self-perpetuating nature of the very large foundations that, in the main, tilt to the left. I think here of Ford, MacArthur, and their assets. This is another AEI report I did. Their accumulation of assets is greater than the disbursement of grants. So their wealth continues to accrete, and that concerns me a lot. When Al Gore Sr. and Estes Kefauver started looking at foundations in the late 1960s, they wanted to put a time limit on foundations. I think that's worth looking at, because we've got these forces that are really quite unaccountable. At the same time, we see major conservative foundations so concerned that there'll be a progressivization of their fortunes. I think here of Olin and Simon, that they're choosing to sunset. I think we need to be concerned about the large progressive foundations and their influence and their self-perpetuating and non-accountability.
Mm-hmm. What are you working on next, Howard, related to this issue or any other?
Well, right now I'm very interested in an effort in Atlanta for a large neighborhood of Atlanta to secede from the rest of the city because they're so dissatisfied with this local government down there and law enforcement specifically. And so I'm a big fan of American localism. It's not unrelated to my fandom for civil society. And so this is the green shoot of American localism coming up And I'm following that very closely. Did a report for AI. I've got an article coming out in City Journal about this movement. So I tend to flit around.
Okay, well, great. I think we'll end it there, Howard, if that's okay. Thanks so much for doing this with us, and we'll get you a good, nice, either giving review refrigerator magnet or a coffee mug, which might be gently pre-used or something like that. But thanks for doing it.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Michael, and thank you so much for having me on.